Okay, so let's really dive into this. Just take a second and think about your day to day. How often do you actually, tell someone about something that happened?
Oh, constantly. Like maybe sharing something funny that happened on the commute or explaining a situation at work.
Or just listening to a friend tell their story, right? It's not some formal thing most of the time.
No, not at all. It's just,
Mm.
it's baked right into how we chat with people every single day.
Exactly. Storytelling isn't this like high art form for fancy writers. It's really, really deep in our normal conversations. It's pretty fundamental to how we connect with each other.
Totally fundamental. It's the main way we share what we've gone through, how we build connections, make sense of things for ourselves, and then, communicate that understanding to someone else.
And that everydayness, that fundamental role, is exactly why this deep dive is so, so relevant for you listening, especially if you're working on your English communication skills.
Right. Because think about it, every single time you talk about something that happened before right now.
Mm.
Could be 5 minutes ago, could be last year. You're essentially telling a story.
You're recounting an experience.
Yeah. And being able to do that well in English, clearly, engagingly, that's just essential for actually communicating in the real world. It's more than just listing off facts, isn't it? It's about making an experience feel real for somebody else.
But, looking through the material we've got for this deep dive, it becomes really clear that telling stories effectively in English throws up some specific challenges for learners. The sources we looked at point out some big hurdles.
Yeah, they really do.
Uh,
One of the main ones is that feeling people get where the ideas or the events seem disjointed. Like they're jumping all over the place with no clear path. That lack of flow.
Oh, that lack of flow issue comes up again and again in the source material, doesn't it? It's like, the analogy they use, like trying to put together flat pack furniture.
Huh.
Yes.
Without the instructions. You've got all the bits, the events, the details, but they're just in a jumbled pile. You don't know what order they go in, how they connect.
And the poor listener is sitting there trying to figure it out. They can't see the connections, can't get a clear picture of what actually happened. It's exhausting for them.
Totally exhausting. That
Mhm.
furniture analogy is perfect.
Mm.
It really highlights how much work it puts on the listener when the structure is missing. And another huge challenge, material flags, this is a big one, is dealing with verb tenses.
Ah, tenses, yeah. Specifically, choosing the right past tenses and using them consistently when you're talking about past events. The sources say this is a major, major source of confusion.
It really is. Because tenses are how we signal the timeline, right? If the tenses are off, the whole sequence of events gets muddy. Did this happen before that? Was this already going on when the main thing happened?
Exactly. You might mean for one thing to come before another, but if you accidentally use, say, past simple for both when one was background, the listener gets completely lost trying to reconstruct the order.
They end up spending all their mental energy just trying to figure out the basic chronology, instead of actually engaging with the story itself. What happened when? Is it over? Was it continuous? It added this whole extra layer of difficulty.
And then there's the detail problem, which the sources actually discuss with quite a bit of nuance, I thought.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes learners with the best intentions, they want to be thorough, right? Share everything they remember.
They end up including too many small details, things that aren't really relevant to the main point of the story.
And instead of making it clearer or richer, it just overwhelms the listener. They get bogged down, lose track of the actual story thread. It backfires.
It's the flip side of not enough info, but the result is similar. The listener feels confused, maybe even a bit bored, and they disengage. The sources had another good analogy for this one, too.
Oh yeah, the crowded photo one.
That's the one. Trying to point out one specific person in a super crowded photo, but you start by describing every single other person in the background, what they're wearing, the pattern on the wallpaper.
By the time you get to the actual person, the listener's brain is just full of noise. They've forgotten who you were even trying to show them. It's detail overload.
Exactly. All that extra data just clutters the picture. So, okay, our mission then in this deep dive is to tackle these specific challenges head on, the messy flow, the tense troubles, the detail overload, using all the practical insights we've pulled from this source material.
Right. We're going to unpack these resources and lay out a clear, really actionable roadmap for you to tell your stories in English much more effectively. We'll look at how to build a simple, solid structure, like a blueprint.
We'll introduce some specific natural-sounding phrases. The sources highlight those verbal signposts that really help guide your listener along.
And we'll dig into the strategies straight from this material for adding just the right amount of color, those details and emotions, without going overboard and overwhelming people.
Plus, we'll cover that crucial advice on handling verb tenses to keep your timeline crystal clear. And we'll also touch on that fascinating cultural side of storytelling in English that the sources bring up. It helps explain why native speakers might tell stories the way they do.
Yeah, that cultural context is really useful. So
Yeah.
the big goal here is that by the end of our chat today, you, listening, will feel way more equipped, much more confident the next time you want to share something that happened to you in English.
You'll have practical tools, practical insights right from this material to make your stories clear, engaging, and actually, enjoyable for other people to listen to. Moving from maybe feeling hesitant to feeling empowered.
That sounds like a really worthwhile deep dive. Let's jump in. And according to all the material we've looked at, the absolute starting point, the non-negotiable foundation, is structure.
Yeah, it's striking how consistently these sources hammer home that point. Lack of structure is the root cause of so much confusion. When you jump around, when you start in the middle, when you forget to mention key people until halfway through, you force the listener's brain to work incredibly hard.
It's just cognitively demanding for them.
Yeah.
All their mental effort goes into trying to assemble the pieces, figure out the order, build the framework themselves, instead of just, listening and enjoying the story. The sources are really clear. Make it easy for your listener. Don't make them work so hard.
It's like that other analogy the sources use trying to follow a map where you can see the start and the end points, but the roads connecting them are all tangled up or parts are just missing.
Exactly. You know where you're supposed to end up, but the path is confusing, frustrating, and illogical. You get lost.
But here's the good news. The solution proposed in these resources is wonderfully simple. Really effective, but simple. They cut through all the potential complexity and say, look, at its core, a good story, any story really, just needs 3 fundamental parts.
3 parts. That's it. The beginning, the middle, and the end.
Beginning, middle, end. Okay.
They emphasize this isn't some complex literary theory. It's a universal framework. It mirrors how we naturally process almost everything. Something starts, something happens, something concludes. It's intuitive.
And the sources really stress focusing on the simplicity first. Forget fancy narrative tricks when you're building the foundation.
Absolutely. That stuff can come later, maybe. The most powerful first step, according to this material, is just internalizing this basic 3-part model. Use it like a mental checklist before you even open your mouth. Think, okay, what needs to go in the beginning? What's the main event for the middle? How does it all wrap up at the end?
And they give really solid reasons why this simple structure is so critical, both for you as the storyteller and for the person listening. For the storyteller, they say it works like a kind of mental filter.
Yeah, that's a great term for it. When you know your job for the first part is just setting the scene, the middle is the main action, the end is closure. It helps you manage the information overload from your own memory. It makes it easier to filter out tangents and decide which details are essential right now versus what can wait, or maybe even be left out completely.
So it stops you from getting lost down rabbit holes of your own memories, keeps you focused on the main path of the story.
Exactly. It provides guardrails for your own thoughts and for the listener. Oh, it's like giving them a crystal clear map right from the start. They instinctively know where they are in the narrative journey. Okay, this is the setup. Now we're getting into the main point. Okay, looks like they're finishing up now.
Which massively reduces their cognitive load, right? They aren't constantly trying to figure out, where are we in this story? What's going on?
Precisely. They're not spending precious mental energy assembling the timeline or guessing the relevance of information. They can actually relax and just listen because the structure is predictable and guides them reliably. This directly tackles that feeling of confusion and effort the sources talked about. The story just unfolds logically.
So the fundamental takeaway here is the sheer power of that simple beginning, middle, and structure. It's the skeleton, the absolute foundation for clarity no matter what story you're telling.
It really is the bedrock.
Yeah.
Get that framework right, and you've honestly solved a huge chunk of the communication problem that the sources highlight. Okay, so if that's the overall structure, let's dive deeper into each part now, building the story piece by piece, following the guidance from the material.
Makes sense. Let's start right at the start. Part 1, the beginning.
The beginning. The sources consistently call this setting the scene. And its main job, its absolute top priority, is to orient your listener quickly. Give them the essential background info before you get to the juicy part.
Right, because if you dive straight into the main action, the listener is immediately playing catch-up. They're scrambling to figure out who's involved, where you are, when this even happened, all while you're already describing the climax.
Exactly. The sources use that analogy of providing coordinates on a map, before describing the journey.
Mm.
You need to tell them who is involved, where is this happening, when did it take place, and what was the general situation? What were you doing right at the start before anything interesting happened?
Answering those questions up front just places the listener right into the context immediately. They have the basic facts they need to anchor everything else you're about to say.
And the material is super specific here, actually listing out those 4 key questions the beginning should ideally answer to set the scene efficiently.
Yeah, can you recap those?
Sure.
Yeah.
Stito, who is involved, where is it happening, when did it take place, and what was generally happening at the start.
And they give that brilliant, really concise example sentence that nails all 4 in one go. It's like a perfect little micro-story start.
It is. The sentence is, last weekend I was at a coffee shop with my friend, and we were just chatting about work.
Okay, let's break that down like the source analysis does, because it really shows how efficient it is. Last weekend.
Boom. Answers when? Listener knows the time frame. Simple.
I and my friend.
Answers who? We know the key players right away.
At a coffee shop.
Answers where gives the listener a clear location to picture.
And we were just chatting about work.
Answers what was happening, establishes that initial kind of normal, calm situation before the main event kicks in.
It's amazing how much context is packed into that one simple sentence. The listener is immediately grounded. They know the who, where, when, what. They have their bearings.
And the sources are adamant. Getting this basic info out first is crucial because it prevents that instant confusion. Imagine if you just started this story with, say, someone gave me a free dessert.
Right. The listener's mind would immediately start racing. Where? Who gave it to you? Who are you with? When was this? All these basic orienting questions.
Exactly. And while their brain is busy asking those questions, they're missing the next part of your story. By setting the scene first, you answer those questions up front, allowing the listener to relax, their foundation is set, and they're fully ready to receive the actual interesting part of the story as it unfolds.
It sets expectations, helps them visualize the scene. It's like loading the background graphic before the character starts moving on the screen. Let's think about those other examples from the sources too, just to reinforce the principle. A work story might start.
Maybe something like, yesterday morning I was sitting at my desk, working on that big report.
Okay, again, when, yesterday morning, who, I, where, at my desk, what initial activity, working on the report. All the essentials are there, quick and clear.
Or for a travel story, maybe.
Yeah.
4 years ago, I was backpacking through Italy with my sister, and we were looking for our hostel again.
Yeah. When, a few years ago, who, I, my sister, where, backpacking through Italy implies outside street, what initial activity, looking for the hostel. Same principle. Orient the listener efficiently right at the start.
So the key point for the beginning. Set the stage clearly and quickly. Get those essential coordinates out there.
Got it. Scene set. Now, we move into the heart of it, right? The middle.
The middle, yes. The source material describes this as the part where something interesting happens. This is the main event, the incident, the turning point, the reason you're telling the story in the first place. It's where the problem crops up, or the unexpected thing occurs, or the main action unfolds.
The sources called it the exciting part, but they were careful to clarify that exciting doesn't necessarily mean, like, car chases and explosions.
No, not necessarily.
No.
It just means noteworthy. It's the thing that disrupts the normal situation you established in the beginning. It's the core reason you decided this experience was worth sharing.
Okay, so let's continue with that coffee shop example from the sources. We set the scene. Last weekend, I was at a coffee shop with my friend just chatting about work. Now the middle introduces the main event.
Exactly. The middle part was, suddenly the waiter walked over and gave us a free dessert. We were so surprised because we hadn't ordered it.
Ah, there's the disruption. The normal routine of chatting is broken by this unexpected action, the waiter arriving with unordered dessert.
Right. And notice that word suddenly. The sources really highlight words like this as great verbal signposts. It signals to the listener, okay, here comes the main event. Things are changing now. It injects that feeling of abruptness.
Makes the listener feel the surprise a bit, too. And adding the reaction immediately, we were so surprised because we hadn't ordered it, that does 2 things, right? It shows the emotion, but also explains why it was surprising.
Exactly. It underlines why this event is noteworthy. It was totally unexpected. This middle section is the absolute core of the narrative. It is the plot. It's the problem, the surprise, the key sequence of actions. It's the body of your story.
Without the middle, you've just got a beginning and an end, but no actual story connecting them. The listener knows where you were and how things finished, but they have no idea what happened to get you from A to B.
It's the engine driving the whole thing forward. It's the reason you bothered to start the story. And once that main event, that core action, has played out, the story needs to find its conclusion. It needs to wrap up neatly.
Which brings us logically to the final part, the end. According to the sources, the purpose here is pretty clear. Provide closure, resolution.
Yep. It tells the listener what happened as a result of that middle event. How did the situation finally conclude? It brings the whole thing to a satisfying finish.
So finishing up our coffee shop saga, the ending provided in the source material was?
It was. It turned out that the dessert was for another table, but the waiter told us to keep it. It was such a nice surprise.
Okay, and that clearly resolves the mystery introduced in the middle, the unexpected dessert.
Yes, it turned out that the dessert was for another table. That explains why the surprising thing happened. The listener isn't left wondering. The little mystery is solved.
The confusion is cleared up. Makes sense.
Precisely. And then, but the waiter told us to keep it. That gives the final outcome. The clear resolution of the situation is you got free dessert.
Nice. And that last bit, it was such a nice surprise, just summarizes the overall feeling, reinforcing the positive note it ended on.
Exactly. And the sources stress why having a clear ending like this is so important. Without one, they say the story just feels unfinished. It kind of trails off awkwardly.
Leaves the listener hanging, thinking, okay, and is that it?
Right. A good ending gives that crucial sense of completion. It provides the final takeaway message or feeling. It leaves a clear impression and makes the whole narrative feel satisfyingly whole, like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place.
Okay, so let's quickly recap that super important three-part structure from the source guidance. Beginning. Set the scene clearly. Who, where, when, what.
Middle. Describe the main action, the interesting event, the disruption, the core of the story.
End. Finish it up with a clear resolution, outcome, or final feeling. Provide that closure.
That simple framework is just incredibly powerful for achieving clarity. It's the absolute blueprint for a comprehensible story.
It really is. That structure gives us the skeleton, the essential clarity. But, just having the bones isn't always the most exciting thing to listen to. To make stories feel alive, engaging, sound like natural conversation, we need to add some flavor, right? Some better language.
Absolutely. And the sources are really helpful here too, highlighting specific types of natural expressions that act like verbal signposts.
Ah, yes. Those phrases native speakers tend to use, maybe without even thinking about it, to guide the listener smoothly along the path of the story.
Exactly. Once you've got that basic BME structure sort of internalized, deliberately weaving in some of these phrases makes your story flow so much better. It helps hold attention, and crucially, it makes your English sound much more conversational, much less like you're just reciting a list of events.
Okay, so let's break down the types of phrases the sources point out. First up, phrases for starting the story, grabbing attention, signaling, hey, listen to this.
Right? These are often like explicit invitations to listen. They can create instant intrigue or set a specific tone right from the beginning. The sources give examples like, you won't believe what happened to me.
Ooh, yeah, that immediately makes you think, okay, what? Tell me. Creates instant curiosity.
Exactly. It generates that what response, or a simpler, more interactive one. Guess what?
Pulls the listener right in, makes them participate, even if just mentally.
Or one that sets the tone straight away. So the funniest thing happened the other day.
Immediately tells you, okay, this is going to be a lighthearted, humorous story. It prepares you for that.
Right. Using openings like these just makes you sound more spontaneous, more engaging. It signals, okay, lean in, folks, story time. It prepares the listener to receive a narrative, not just a piece of information.
Okay, so you've hooked them, you've set the scene using the beginning structure, and now you're into the middle, describing the main action. Maybe something unexpected happens. How do you use language to add a bit of drama there, signal that turning point, keep the listener invested?
This is where another set of phrases comes in really handy. The ones the sources highlight for building suspense or signaling a key action or shift. These are crucial for the middle part.
What kind of phrases are we talking about here?
Things like all of a sudden or out of nowhere. They have a very similar feel, right? Very abrupt.
Yeah, they definitely inject that feeling of suddenness, of something unexpected breaking the pattern.
They do. They mirror the shock or surprise of the event itself, making it feel impactful for the listener too.
Yeah.
Great for highlighting those moments when things change quickly. Then there's the really simple but absolutely essential "and then."
Seems basic, but I guess in the middle, if several things happen in sequence, and then, is vital for keeping that order clear.
Incredibly useful. It just clearly links one action to the next. It maintains that chronological flow within the middle section, prevents any confusion about what happened first, second, third. super important for clarity. And another powerful one the sources mention is "to my surprise."
Ah, because that explicitly states your emotional reaction right within the action.
Exactly. You're not just describing the event. You're telling the listener how it felt to you in that moment. It helps them connect with your internal experience, builds that empathy we talked about.
So using these kinds of phrases strategically within the middle section breaks up the description, highlights the key moments, signals importance. It's like putting a little flag on the most crucial parts of the action.
Yeah, it's like saying, pay attention now, this bit matters. Adds dynamism, keeps the listener focused on the core event. Okay, so the main events have unfolded using these techniques. Now you need to bring it all home, land the plane smoothly.
Right. You started with an invitation. You need a clear signal that you're finishing up now. Provide that closure we discussed for the end part. Avoid just stopping abruptly.
Exactly. You need phrases that clearly signal the end is coming, maybe summarize the outcome or the feeling, stop it from just, fizzling out awkwardly.
So what did the source material suggest for effective ending phrases?
They offered some really clear and useful ones. A very direct signal is "in the end,"
Can't get much clearer than that. Listener knows, okay, this is the final result.
or something like, "and that's how it all happened." That feels very complete, very final, wraps it up nicely.
Or maybe a phrase that sums up your overall feeling about the experience, kind of like a final takeaway, like, it was such a crazy experience.
Precisely. And you can easily swap out crazy for whatever fits funny, weird, surprising, memorable, terrifying. It summarizes the emotional impact or the nature of the story.
Using these ending phrases really helps prevent that awkward silence where the listener isn't sure if you've finished. It gives a clear signal, provides a satisfying conclusion, they know it's done, and they understand the final result or your feeling about it.
Absolutely. It just makes the whole story feel complete and well packaged. So consciously incorporating these specific types of expressions for opening, for building suspense or signaling key actions in the middle, and for closing really adds layers of naturalness and engagement. They're powerful tools.
They really are. They guide the listener, make it dynamic, make it enjoyable. They take that basic structure and make it breathe, make it sound like real conversation.
Okay, so we've got the structure for clarity, the phrases for flow and signaling. But what really makes a story stick in someone's mind, what makes it vivid and relatable, it's adding that color, right?
Yeah.
Those emotions, those specific details that let the listener almost see and feel what you experienced.
Ah, yes. Moving beyond just the sequence of events to bringing the experience itself to life.
Exactly, and the sources are very clear. Adding specific details, things you saw, heard, maybe even smelled or tasted, and directly conveying your emotions are absolutely crucial for this. It helps the listener visualize the scene vividly and connect with how you actually felt during the event. They really emphasize the value of this for making a story truly engaging.
And this is where the sources issue that really important warning, that point about finding the right balance. They strongly push for adding details, but they immediately follow up with, be careful, not too many details.
This is such a critical point, isn't it? Because as a learner, your instinct might be more detail equals better story, right? More information must be clearer.
It seems logical. You want to paint the full picture. But the sources explain, quite persuasively, I think, that flooding the listener with too many minor, irrelevant details can completely backfire. It can actually make the story less clear, more boring, or just plain overwhelming.
Remember that crowded photo analogy again?
Yeah.
If you describe every single background element, the color of everyone's shoelaces, the exact pattern on the curtains before you get to the main subject.
The listener gets completely lost. Their brain is trying to process all this extra information that doesn't actually matter for the core story. It becomes mental clutter. They lose the main thread because their focus is diluted by non-essential data. It's like trying to find that one specific star by describing every grain of sand on the beach first. It's just noise.
So the key insight from the sources here isn't just add details, it's add the right details. Be selective. Choose the details that are impactful, the ones that genuinely help the listener visualize something important, understand the situation better, or connect with the feeling, rather than just adding random facts you happen to remember.
And the material gives that great contrast example to illustrate this, comparing the very simple statement, I saw a dog.
Okay. Factually true, minimal info. Not very engaging or memorable, zero color.
Versus the slightly richer description, I saw the cutest golden retriever running around the park.
Okay, let's break that second one down using the sources analysis again. Why is it so much better? What makes those added details impactful?
Well, first, cutest. That's not an objective fact about the dog. It's your subjective feeling and your emotional reaction. It immediately injects your personality into the description and helps the listener connect with how you felt seeing the dog.
Adds that personal flavor right away.
No. Then, golden retriever. That's specific. Instead of the generic dog, it gives a much clearer visual image. Most people can instantly picture a golden retriever. It makes the scene more vivid in the listener's mind.
Much sharper mental picture. Got it.
And running around the park. That adds action and context. The dog isn't static. It's doing something, running around in a specific setting, the park. It places the dog within a dynamic scene.
So those few carefully chosen additions, cutest, emotion, personality, golden retriever, specific visual, running around the park, action context, work together to make the story come alive, exactly as the sources say. They paint a picture.
Exactly. And they're impactful because they add visual richness, emotional context, and relevant action without burying the listener in unnecessary clutter. You didn't need to describe the dog's collar or the exact path it was running or what kind of trees were in the park unless those details somehow became relevant later in the story. It's about choosing details that serve the narrative and enhance the listener's mental image effectively.
Makes perfect sense. Be selective. Be purposeful with those descriptive details. And the sources highlight that conveying your feelings directly is just as important as the physical details for building that connection with the listener.
Absolutely. How you felt is often the most relatable part of any experience you share. The sources give another excellent contrast example for this, comparing the simple, factual statement, "I was surprised."
Okay. Communicates the basic idea. Grammatically fine, but maybe a little flat. Understated.
Compared with the more expressive version, "I was shocked. I couldn't believe it."
Yeah. Shocked immediately feels stronger, more intense than just surprise, doesn't it? It suggests a much greater level of astonishment, maybe even disbelief.
It definitely a higher degree of emotional reaction. And then adding that phrase, "I couldn't believe it," really amplifies the feeling further. It shows the depth of your reaction. It wasn't just a flicker of surprise, it was profound astonishment. You're emphasizing the intensity.
And the sources are really clear on this. Using these stronger, more precise words to describe your emotions helps the listener truly feel what you felt. It helps them understand the emotional weight of the experience, not just the factual events.
Exactly. When you choose words that accurately reflect the intensity of your emotions, was it mild annoyance or total fury, gentle happiness or pure ecstasy? You invite empathy. The listener can connect more deeply because you're clearly communicating the emotional core of the story.
So the takeaway is, be expressive. Use descriptive language for details. Use stronger, more precise emotion words when they fit the situation. Paint a picture with your words and your feelings.
And here's that crucial balance point again.
Yeah.
Always keep that balance in mind. Don't just throw in random details that don't add anything. And don't use super dramatic language for something that was only mildly interesting or slightly surprising. That feels inauthentic.
Right. The goal, as the sources emphasize repeatedly, is vivid, engaging communication that enhances the connection, not overwhelming the listener with every tiny observation or fleeting feeling you had. It's about selection. Select the details and the emotion words that have the most impact, that move the story forward, that help the listener connect.
Be expressive, yes. But also be selective. Be balanced. That seems to be the real art of adding color effectively, according to this material.
Well put. Okay, so we've got the skeleton structure, the flow, phrases, the color and connection, balanced details, motions. But there's one more crucial piece of the puzzle from the sources that helps hold all this together, especially for clarity. Managing the timeline correctly.
Yes. Back to that challenge of verb tenses we mentioned right at the start. The listener needs to understand the sequence of events clearly. What guidance did the sources offer here?
This is so vital for avoiding confusion. As the sources note, messing up the tenses is like scrambling the order of events on your narrative map. Even if all the points are there, the journey itself stops making sense. Their key insight is actually quite straightforward. Consistent use of a few core past tenses is your best strategy.
Okay, so not necessarily needing super complex grammar, but using the basic tenses consistently and correctly.
Exactly. They really emphasize using the past simple tense for the main sequence of actions in your story. This is like the workhorse tense for narrative. Event 1 happened, past simple. Then event 2 happened, past simple. Then event 3 happened, past simple.
Okay, that makes sense for the main steps. What about providing background information or describing something that was already happening before or during a main event?
For that, the sources point strongly to using the past continuous, was where plus ein verb. This tense is perfect for setting the scene or describing an ongoing background situation against which the main past simple actions occur.
Okay, so past simple for the main action beats, the steps on the journey, and past continuous for the background scenery, or what was already in progress when those steps were taken.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right.
Let's revisit that coffee shop example again to see it in action. The beginning set the scene. Last weekend, I was, past simple state, at a coffee shop with my friend, and we were just chatting, past continuous background activity, about work.
Right. Woes tells us the location, a state. We're chatting tells us the ongoing activity that was happening at that time before the main story event kicked off.
Precisely. It paints the background picture. Then, the middle introduced the main event using past simple for the key actions. Suddenly, the waiter walked over, past simple action, and gave, past simple action, us a free dessert. We were, past simple state, so surprised.
Okay, walked over and gave, those are the main sequential actions of the disruptive event. They happen one after the other. And we're surprised describes your state or reaction at that moment, resulting from those actions.
Exactly. Those are the core actions moving the plot forward. And then the end resolved it, again primarily using past simple. It turned out, past simple action discovery, that the dessert was, past simple state, for another table, but the waiter told, past simple action, us to keep it. It was, past simple state, such a nice surprise.
Turned out, told, was, for the final state and feeling all past simple again. These are the final actions and states that conclude the story sequence.
Exactly. The sources demonstrate how consistently applying this pattern, past continuous for the ongoing background at the start, or sometimes during the middle, if needed, and past simple for the main sequence of actions and resulting states throughout the middle and end, provides a really clear, natural-sounding timeline for the listener. It inherently signals this was the situation, then this happened, then this was the result.
It's like the past continuous draws the stage setting, and the past simple brings the actors onto the stage and moves them through their actions step by step.
That's a perfect analogy. It helps the listener clearly distinguish between the ongoing background context and the specific sequential events that constitute the story itself. Now, the sources do mention one other tense that can be useful occasionally. The past perfect, had plus past participle.
Ah, the past perfect. When would you need that in a typical story?
You use it when you need to refer to an action or event that happened before the main past simple timeline of your story began, something that occurred earlier than the beginning point you established.
Okay, so like providing a piece of even earlier background information that's relevant to understanding the main story.
Exactly. Let's imagine a slightly different coffee shop story. Maybe this time you received a surprisingly large bill. In the middle, you might say. The waiter walked over, past simple, and gave past simple us the bill. We were shocked, past simple state, because we had only ordered past perfect 2 coffees.
Ah, okay. Had only ordered uses the past perfect because the ordering happened before the waiter walked over and gave you the bill, which are in past simple. It explains why you were shocked by the bill.
Precisely. It places that earlier action clearly before the main narrative sequence. But the key takeaway from the sources is, you don't need a vast array of complex tenses for most everyday storytelling. For the vast majority of stories, consistent use of past simple for the main events and past continuous for the background, with maybe an occasional past perfect for an earlier event, is all you need to create a clear timeline. The absolute key word here is consistency. Randomly jumping between tenses without a clear reason is what creates that timeline confusion for the listener.
That's incredibly practical advice. It demystifies tenses a bit. Focus on consistent use of past simple for the action sequence, past continuous for the ongoing background. That provides the clear map.
It really does. It helps the listener follow the chronology effortlessly.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've got the blueprint, structure, the flow agents, phrases, the color and connection, details, emotions, and now the timeline management, tenses. But, storytelling isn't just about the technical aspects of language, is it? It's also deeply embedded in culture.
Oh, absolutely. And the source material brings up some really fascinating points here about how storytelling actually functions in many English-speaking contexts. Understanding this is vital, not just for how to tell stories, but why they're told the way they often are.
So what were some of those key cultural insights the sources highlighted?
Well, They really emphasize that in many English-speaking cultures, and they specifically mention American and British examples, storytelling, particularly sharing personal anecdotes, is a really significant, almost constant and expected part of daily social interaction.
It's not just for special occasions. People are doing it all the time in casual conversation.
All the time, with friends, family, even colleagues. It's described as a core way people connect, build rapport, share experiences, and frankly, entertain each other.
Okay, entertain each other. That feels like a really crucial nuance the sources pointed out about the purpose of a lot of this everyday storytelling.
It is crucial
Yeah.
because it means the goal often isn't just about relaying facts with maximum efficiency or objective accuracy, like you might in a report.
So, what is the primary goal then in many of these casual contexts?
The sources suggest that significantly, maybe even primarily, the goal is often entertainment.
Entertainment. Wow. Okay, that's a really key cultural lens to look through. It shifts the focus, doesn't it? From just factual reporting towards engaging the listener, making the story interesting, maybe making them laugh or feel something vivid, holding their attention.
It absolutely shifts the focus. And this focus on entertainment helps explain certain common practices that might seem a bit strange if you come from a culture where absolute factual precision is the highest value in all communication, even casual chat.
Like that point the sources made about people sometimes choosing to exaggerate slightly, particularly, they noted, in American culture when telling funny stories.
Yes, exactly. And the sources are very careful to frame this correctly. The motivation, they stress, isn't to deceive or lie about the core events. It's done specifically to enhance the story's effect, to make it sound funnier, or perhaps a bit more dramatic, or just more interesting overall, and therefore more entertaining for the listener.
So because the cultural value placed on the entertainment factor is so high in these casual settings, a small, harmless embellishment that boosts the humor or the impact is often just accepted, understood as part of the deal.
That's the implication from the sources, yes.
Yeah.
It's seen as part of the performance of telling a good story.
Yeah.
You're not changing the fundamental truth. The waiter did give you the dessert. You did see the dog, but maybe you make your reaction sound slightly bigger than it really was for comedic effect. Or you describe a minor obstacle as slightly more dramatic to build engagement. It's about crafting the narrative for maximum listener enjoyment, not just for factual record keeping.
That makes sense when you frame it as enhancing the entertainment value within that cultural context. It's about making the story better for the audience.
Okay. And another huge way stories are made engaging in these cultures, which the sources also highlighted, is through nonverbal communication, right?
Oh, massively important. Using your body and your voice. The sources explicitly mention people using gestures and voice changes frequently and naturally when telling stories in casual conversation. It's not just the words, it's the whole package.
Totally. And they gave those great examples, like maybe leaning in and whispering a little to build suspense for a key moment.
Which physically draws the listener in, creates that feeling of shared secrecy or drama. Or, the opposite, raising your voice to convey excitement or surprise.
Yeah, it helps the listener feel the energy and intensity that you felt.
Yeah.
You're conveying the emotion not just with the words you choose, but through the actual sound and energy of your voice.
And beyond voice, things like strategic pauses for anticipation, using your hands to show size or movement, your facial expressions mirroring the emotions in the story. These all add powerful layers.
They absolutely do. They make the story more dynamic, more engaging, and as the sources put it, often more fun to listen to. They convey energy and emotion physically. It's really an integral part of the whole storytelling performance, especially in these informal social contexts.
So, understanding this cultural dimension that casual storytelling is super common, often prioritizes entertainment, might involve some humor or slight exaggeration for effect, and heavily utilizes nonverbals, gives really valuable insight into why native English speakers often tell stories the way they do, and why the techniques we've discussed, structure for clarity, phrases for flow, vivid details, and emotions, are so effective in this environment. It helps decode the unwritten rules.
Exactly. It provides that broader context. Okay, this has been incredibly rich. We've covered the essential blueprint of BME structure.
We've looked at those verbal signpost voices that add flow and naturalness.
We've tackled how to add color and connection with balanced details and emotions.
We got practical advice on using tenses consistently for a clear timeline.
And we've explored the cultural stage on which a lot of English storytelling plays out. So the big question now is, what does this all mean for actually doing it? How do you, the listener, take all this great theory from the sources and start putting it to practice effectively?
Right, because understanding is one thing, but actually changing how you speak, Takes practice.
It absolutely does.
Hmm.
And the source material is really good here because it doesn't just leave you with the theory. It lays out a very practical, step-by-step path forward. It breaks down the challenge of practicing into simple, manageable actions. It's designed to help you move from just understanding these ideas to actively using them and building that crucial muscle memory.
Okay, fantastic. What's step one in this practical plan from the sources?
Step one, they suggest, is super simple. Choose a story. Just think of a short personal experience you've had. To make it easier when you're starting out, try to pick something that has a fairly obvious beginning, middle, and end already. Something with a clear sequence.
Like something funny that happened or something surprising or maybe just something interesting. The sources mentioned, those often work well.
Yeah, exactly. Those types often have a very clear disruption or main event in the middle, which makes the structure easier to identify and work with initially. So find a simple recent story with a clear natural flow.
Okay, got my story. What's step two?
Step two is to consciously apply the structure. Once you have your chosen story in mind, take a moment to plan it out. You can do this just mentally or maybe quickly jot down a few bullet points for each part. What essential info goes in the beginning? Who, where, when, initial situation. What was the key event or sequence of events for the middle? And how did it all conclude or resolve in the end?
So map it out against that BME framework.
Precisely. Then, the crucial part. Practice actually telling the story out loud, focusing specifically on following that BME structure you just planned. Make sure you hit the key points for each section in the right order. Don't worry too much about perfection at this stage. Just focus on the flow through those three parts.
Okay. Structure it, then practice telling it, focusing on hitting those main BME points first. Makes sense. What's step three?
Step three is to start consciously weaving in some of those useful storytelling expressions we talked about earlier, the verbal signposts. The sources advise not to try and cram them all in at once. That would sound unnatural. But maybe deliberately pick just a few to start with.
Like maybe choose one phrase to use for the opening. You won't believe this, or guess what?
Yeah. And maybe one or two for signaling key moments in the middle. And then, or all of a sudden.
And one phrase to clearly signal the ending. So in the end, or it was such a funny experience.
Exactly. The goal is to try and include at least two or three of these types of phrases deliberately as you practice telling the story again, layering them onto your BME structure.
Okay, so the practice sequence is choose a simple story, structure it using BME, then practice telling it while consciously sprinkling in a few key opening, middle, and ending phrases. How does the material suggest we actually do this practicing? What are the effective methods?
The sources offer several really practical suggestions. One is perhaps the simplest. Just tell the story to yourself out loud.
Just talking to yourself, does that really help?
Hugely beneficial, according to the sources. Just the act of verbalizing it, hearing yourself say the words, helps you feel the flow much better. You'll immediately notice where the structure feels a bit shaky, or where transition sounds awkward, or where you stumble over words. It helps you self-correct.
Yeah, I can see that. It helps you spot the rough patches in your own delivery. What else?
Another powerful suggestion is to record yourself on your phone while you tell the story, and then this is the important bit, listen back to it.
Ooh, that can be tough, listening to your own voice.
It can feel a bit awkward, definitely, but the sources highlight it as incredibly revealing. You get to hear exactly what your story sounds like from a listener's perspective. You can pinpoint moments where maybe you rushed, or where a transition wasn't clear, or if the ending felt satisfying or just fizzled out. You can assess your own clarity and engagement objectively.
That's a really good point. Painful but effective. Any other practice methods?
Yes, they also suggest writing the story down. Actually sit and write it out, consciously applying the BME structure and deliberately trying to incorporate some of those key phrases and maybe some well-chosen descriptive details or emotion words we talked about.
How does writing help with speaking?
Writing forces you to be much more deliberate about your word choices and the organization of your ideas. It slows down the process and makes you consciously construct the narrative. Then, once you've written it, you can use that as a script to practice speaking from, which can help solidify the language patterns.
Okay, that makes sense. And I guess the ideal scenario.
The ideal scenario, the sources suggest, if it's possible for you, is to actually share your practice story with someone else. Maybe a language exchange partner, a tutor, or even just a patient friend or family member who knows you're working on your English storytelling.
Getting that real-time feedback.
Exactly. They can tell you honestly if the story was clear, if it was engaging, where they might have gotten a bit lost, or what parts they particularly enjoyed. That real-world feedback is invaluable for refining your skills.
So the overarching message here seems to be, you have to do it. Active practice is essential. Just reading about this stuff isn't enough.
Not even close. You have to actively practice telling stories, repeatedly. That's how you build the mental pathways, the muscle memory in your brain and even in your mouth. Each time you deliberately apply the structure, consciously use the phrases, experiment with adding balanced details and emotions, you get a little bit better, a little bit smoother, a little more confident.
It really is like building any other skill. Practice makes, well, maybe not perfect, but certainly much, much better.
Definitely better. Start small. Focus on getting that BME structure solid first. Then begin layering in the language tools like the phrases. Then gradually work on refining the color and energy with details and emotions. It's a process of building layers, but a very achievable one with consistent, intentional practice.
Yeah, and the sources really emphasize that idea of gradual improvement through deliberate, consistent application. It's not about getting it perfect overnight.
Exactly. Okay, wow. This has been a really deep dive, hasn't it, into what feels like such a fundamental skill for everyday communication in English. We've really tried to pull out the most practical, actionable insights from the source material to create a useful guide for you listening.
Yeah, we hammered home the absolute necessity of that simple, clear three-part structure, beginning, middle, end as the foundation. The blueprint for clarity, the antidote to confusion.
We showed how those specific types of storytelling phrases, the openers, the middle signposts, the closers, act like dynamic verbal guides, helping the listener follow along easily and making the whole thing sound much more natural and engaging.
And we explored that really crucial art of adding color and feeling, using well-chosen specific details and clear emotion words, while constantly remembering that critical point of balance the sources warned us about. Aim to captivate with vividness, but don't overwhelm with unnecessary clutter. Be selective.
We also tackled that common challenge of the timeline, focusing on the source's practical advice. Use past simple consistently for the main sequence of events. Use past continuous for the background context. Clear, consistent tense usage is key.
And finally, we added that important layer of cultural context, understanding that in many English-speaking settings, casual storytelling is super frequent, often aims to entertain, might sometimes involve a touch of harmless exaggeration for effect, especially humor, and relies heavily on nonverbal cues like voice and gestures.
And the hope is that by focusing on these specific elements, all drawn directly from the source material we analyzed, you now have a much more powerful toolkit. It should really help you overcome those common frustrations, the disjointed ideas, the tense tangles, the detail overload, and make you feel significantly more comfortable and effective the next time you share one of your own experiences in English.
Absolutely. And just to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on that cultural piece we just discussed. The sources mentioned observations about American and British approaches to storytelling. So here's a question for you to reflect on. How does storytelling typically work in your own native language or your home culture?
That's a really interesting question for comparison, isn't it? Are there noticeable differences in the expected structure? Is there generally more or less emphasis placed on openly expressing emotion compared to what we discussed? What about humor or adding descriptive details? Is slight exaggeration for effect common or perhaps frowned upon in casual talk?
Thinking about those potential contrasts can actually give you incredibly deep insights into the specific nuances of English storytelling norms. It helps you see why certain techniques are emphasized in English communication, and it highlights what might be different from your own ingrained communication habits, allowing you to adapt more consciously. What really stands out to you when you make that comparison?
That kind of cross-cultural reflection is so illuminating. It adds a whole other dimension to understanding not just language, but communication styles more broadly. It helps explain why the techniques highlighted in the sources are considered effective in this particular linguistic and cultural context.
Definitely. And the source material did sort of hint that mastering these fundamentals, the structure, the core language tools, the clarity is really the essential foundation before moving on to even more subtle refinements, right?
Yeah, things like really perfecting your delivery, sounding even more natural by absorbing more idiomatic language, maybe learning more implicitly just by listening closely to native speakers. Those feel like logical next steps, perhaps topics for another deep dive down the road once this core foundation is solid.
For sure. There's always more to learn, always further refinements possible in language.
Always. But for now, the main message from the sources, and from us, I suppose, is keep talking. Keep practicing these techniques we've discussed today. Find opportunities to tell your stories. And really try to, enjoy the process of learning and sharing your experiences in English.
Well said. Until next time.